So welcome again to today's webinar, The Future of Google Analytics, your checklist for a smooth transition to Google Analytics 4. In today's meeting, I'm joined by Tim Jägle, Platform Account Manager from Google.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can see and hear me. I'm Tim. I'm very happy to join Philip today on this meeting. I'm a Platforms Account Manager with Google, which essentially means that I'm working with my clients on topics focused on data measurement based in Dublin, and I'm happy to support this webinar today and give a quick outlook on what we are doing with Google Analytics 4 at the moment, and hopefully answer some questions if you have any in the Q&A section.
Thank you, Tim. Unfortunately, my colleague Michi Gruber will not be able to join us today as he is sick. And as I'm pretty sure he's watching, gute Besserung. And me, I'm Philippe Velin. I'm Analytics and Tracking Specialist at SMAC. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about the sunset of Universal Analytics. When does it happen exactly? And which impact does it have? Then Universal Analytics versus Google Analytics 4. What are the differences? And making the switch to Google Analytics 4, we show you some best practices and a personal checklist for you. And in the end, we're going to give you an outlook, what is coming next in Google Analytics 4, and we take some time to answer your questions. You can post your questions throughout the whole session via the Q&A function. And unfortunately, we won't be able to answer all your questions, but we're going to tackle them afterwards as much as we can, and maybe do a follow-up post on LinkedIn. And I also welcome all viewers who joined us via LinkedIn at this point. So the sunset of Universal Analytics, when does it happen and what are the implications? So I'm sure you have already heard that there is a time and date for the sunset of Universal Analytics, and it will be on the 1st of July 2023. That means until the 30th of June 2023, data collection and reporting will still be able in Universal Analytics. And after that, you will have additional 6 months to access your data and reports in Universal Analytics. But with the end of 2023, you will not be able to access your data in Universal Analytics anymore. So if you want your data stored outside of Universal Analytics, make sure to export it in time. What are the impacts of the sunset of Universal Analytics? Of course, you won't have any access to Universal Analytics data with the end of 2023. Also, no further data collection will be possible starting from July 2023. Then, exported conversions to Google Ads, which are currently exported via Universal Analytics, won't work anymore. Also, audience you're using, for example, in Google Ads to retarget your website visitors won't be populated anymore. Your Data Studio reports won't show any data. And your alerts and scheduled reports in Universal Analytics cannot be used anymore. So now is the best time to focus on Google Analytics 4, on a thorough Google Analytics 4 setup. So many of you have already asked, what are the differences between Universal Analytics and Google Analytics 4? So the main differences are, firstly, the data focus. Universal Analytics was very session-based, and Google Analytics 4, on the other hand, is events and user-based. Also, there's a different event model in Universal Analytics than in Google Analytics 4. You might know the event model from Universal Analytics with event category, event action, event label, and also a possible event value. And in Google Analytics 4, you will have event names and various parameters, so dimensions and metrics you can assign to each event. The report focus in Universal Analytics is heavily concentrated on standard reports. In Google Analytics 4, on the other side, it's very good to create custom reports, which are also called explorations. Also, in Universal Analytics, there was only the last non-direct click attribution model. And in Google Analytics 4, you now can choose between various attribution models, like first click, last click, or even data-driven attribution. In Universal Analytics, you now only have standard metrics, but in Google Analytics 4, you will also have additional predictive metrics. We will tackle them a little later. So one example of how we can use different attribution models is you have the model comparison report. So you can always have a look at how are different attribution models impacting your reports. So in this case, for example, we're comparing the cross-channel last click model, which attributes all conversions to the last non-direct click that happened. And on the other side, we have the cross-channel data-driven attribution model. And on the right-hand side, you can see the differences between those two attribution models. So before changing the attribution models, take a look at the model comparison report. Predictive metrics. Predictive metrics are a pretty cool feature in Google Analytics 4. You have the purchase probability, which is the probability that users who were active within the last 28 days make a purchase within the next 7 days. You have the revenue prediction. It is the revenue expected from all purchase conversions within the next 20 days from a user who was active in the last 28 days. And the third predictive metric is the churn probability. It is the probability that a user who was active on an app or site within the last 7 days will not be active anymore within the next 7 days. But you have to meet certain criteria that those predictive metrics become eligible. So during the last 28 days, there must have been at least 1,000 returning users that triggered the relevant metric. So a conversion like a purchase. So now you're probably wondering what are the next steps on how to switch to Google Analytics 4. The switch to Google Analytics 4 will mainly have 4 steps. Step 1 is, of course, creating a Google Analytics 4 property within your Google Analytics account. If you don't have a Google Analytics account, you will have to create a property, an Analytics account before creating a property. The next step is creating a data stream as a basis for data collection. Normally, when setting up a property, you will get directed directly to the window where you set up a data stream. Then, with what is not actual part of the setup, but it's a good point in time to evaluate what you need to measure on your website or app, or what you want to measure on your website or app. Because we have a lot of clients with universal analytics setups, which were done around 5 years ago, for example. And there are lots of events that are not used anymore. So make sure to evaluate what do you really need now And is there probably something you're not tracking right now, what you want to track in the future? So for retailers, for example, it would definitely make sense to implement a thorough e-commerce tracking setup, which means that you track purchases, you track add to cart events whenever someone puts something in his shopping cart, or also product detail views. These are just examples. Step 4 would be implementing those events via Google Tag Manager, plugins in case you're using a shop platform, or directly on the website via GTag. So how to use your Google Analytics for data? We have prepared some examples of how you can actually use your Google Analytics for data. Our first example, you'll know it from Universal Analytics already, is creating remarketing audiences. To create remarketing audiences and to use them, for example, in Google Ads, you have at first to link your Google Analytics 4 property to your Google Ads account. You also have to enable personalized advertising and Google Signals. Then the actual setup of audiences. In the left-hand menu, you navigate to Configure, click on Audiences, and then click on New Audience on the right. As soon as you're done creating the audience will start to get populated and will be automatically exported to your linked accounts, like, for example, Google Ads. So one example of a remarketing audience which is often used is all purchases. So this audience is normally already created in your Google Analytics 4 account, but this is how it would look like. So you see the interface on where you select the dimensions and metrics on which basis you want to include users in your audience. In this case, it is all users who triggered a purchase event. If you want to retarget all users on your website that left something in the shopping cart, you then would have to include all users who triggered an add to cart event. But of course, you would exclude all users who actually bought something. So all users who triggered a purchase event. And in the end, you have only users in this audience who added something to the cart but did not buy anything. Example 3, retarget a predictive audience. As soon as you're eligible for the use of your predictive audiences, you can select them as a template. As you can see in the screenshot, they are already pre-built. So when clicking on create a new audience, you will get directed to this screen. And here you see which predictive audiences are already ready to use and which take a little more time to collect more data. And you would create them simply by clicking on the respective audience you see here. For example, likely 7-day churning users. Another way of how to use your Google Analytics 4 data would be custom reports. So I guess many of you are interested in which campaigns are driving the highest customer lifetime value. In this case, for a better attribution of your purchases or conversions, we always recommend using user ID tracking, because normally your users get distinguished from each other via a client ID, which is stored in a browser cookie. That means that it's not possible to track them across devices or even across browsers. So if you start user ID tracking, you can assign a user ID to users which are logged in on your website And through that, it is possible to track them across devices and across browsers. So again, for a better attribution, start using user ID tracking. Also, make sure that your campaigns are tracked correctly. So in case you are using campaigns from the Google universe, always make sure that auto tagging is selected. In case you're tracking campaigns from outside the Google universe, make sure that you have your UTM parameters properly set up. Then, to create a customer lifetime value report, you can do this via the Explore tab and either choose a template or create a report from scratch. So to create a report from scratch, you would just click on the Explore tab on the left-hand menu, which is marked by the number 1, and then click on Create a New Report. For a template and luckily for customer lifetime value reports, there is a template available. So you can just select the user lifetime template from the explorations. If you choose to create an own report from scratch, then you would select, for example, first user campaign as the dimension. So this would be the first campaign a user came by. And then you can choose either, for example, the lifetime value total or lifetime value average as a metric. In the end, it is necessary to select user lifetime as a chart technique, or else your report won't work as expected. The report in this case would look like this. So you see all your campaigns, how many users came through that campaign, of course, if users would be selected as a metric. What is the lifetime average each campaign had? What is the lifetime engagement duration average? So also a metric you can choose. And how many lifetime transactions were there on average? So as you see, it's possible to create a very, very useful report, custom report, with only like 5 clicks, which is great. So to sum up everything we presented until now, we provide you a checklist for your transition to Google Analytics 4. In general, we would recommend using the Google Tag Manager for the implementation of your Google Analytics 4 property. It will make your life easier in most cases. Try to fully utilize all possibilities, for example, from e-commerce events. Because the more events you're sending to Google Analytics, the better the reports will become. But remember, don't send anything unnecessary to Google Analytics. And adjust your attribution settings according to your business. B2C businesses will have different needs than B2B businesses. For example, one might choose the first click attribution model, and the other one might choose the last click attribution model, or data-driven attribution. Also, it will make a difference whether you are selling groceries or lawnmowers. So think about that. Now, I will quickly walk you through each point in this checklist. I mean, we have already tackled most of those points, but make sure to create a property. This is the first step. Also, make sure you have set up this web stream. Make sure your tracking concept is created. Implement your configurations tag. Implement all your events, especially e-commerce tracking. As I said, where you can track purchases, you can track add to carts, cart removals, detail views, and many things more. If you're using events as conversions, which are not purchases, then make sure to mark them as conversions directly in the Google Analytics interface. Also, make sure to exclude unwanted referrals, for example, payment providers. They can potentially destroy all your reports, all your attribution. Make sure that you have linked all relevant accounts to your Google Analytics 4 property. This could be Google Ads accounts, your Google Search Console account, Search Ads 360, or Display and Video 360. If you're currently using your Google Analytics, your Universal Analytics data as conversions in Google Ads, make sure that you have changed this to Google Analytics 4. So you would have to set up new conversion imports directly in Google Ads. Also, select the data retention period. By default, it is set to 2 months, but you can extend it to 14 months. So when you have only 2 months selected, in your custom reports, you will only have data from the past 2 months. So if it's possible for you, make sure to extend it to 14 months. Update your Data Studio reports with a new data source. If you're currently using Universal Analytics as a data source in your Data Studio reports, then you have to change that. It won't change automatically. Make sure to create all audiences you need. And if needed, export your Universal Analytics data. When everything is set up correctly, hopefully, then it would make sense to compare your data, your Google Analytics 4 data, with Universal Analytics. I normally choose a period of 1 to 2 weeks, and after that, I compare the setups. Numbers will definitely be different, but it shouldn't be, the gap shouldn't be too large. So plus minus 15% are okay. If it's higher or lower, then it would make sense to recheck your setup because something might potentially be wrong with the setup. So, Tim, you brought some updates of what is coming in the future to Google Analytics 4.
All right, perfect. So GA4 outlooks, giving you a short overview of what functionalities are actually on the way. To begin with, to set a small frame about what we are talking about, Google Analytics always has been evolving as long as it's existed. So from starting in 2005, when Google started exploring into the world of analytics, to 2007, when we actually started the product called Google Analytics, to 2018, when Google Analytics 4 launched in the beta, to 2022 now, where Google Analytics 4 is ready to take over from Universal Analytics as the next generation of analytics. To give you a small idea of what we are building for Google Analytics 4 in comparison to Universal Analytics, is we believe that Google Analytics 4 is going to be, and is already, a fundamentally better analytics experience than Universal Analytics. Reasons for that is that Google Analytics 4 is built for working in an ecosystem that is constantly changing in terms of what data we have for us. So we are built for cookieless measurement. We bring behavioral and conversion modeling out of the box instead of having them to implement with extra features for Universal Analytics. And we have a huge bunch of new privacy controls compared to Universal Analytics to demand what users and legislation requires us to do in that terms. Google Analytics 4 is built to be predictive, and these predictive capabilities are once again a huge part of it and how the future will look in terms of measurement. And Philip already covered some of these options in terms of predictive metrics earlier. Then an essential point is Google Analytics 4 is built to work cross-platform, so not only web, but also app, and unite that in one system instead of Universal Analytics and Firebase before. And again, media activation becomes more and more important with less media and less data being available. So again, we are focusing that in terms of integrations with media buying platforms Google operates, and we are striving for that to be the best version of Google Analytics we ever had. When we started Google Analytics 4 in 2018, it was obviously a very new product, but Google Analytics 4 keeps on improving. What we have here is just a few features, an overview of a few features that have been new in Google Analytics 4 since we announced the sunset of Universal Analytics. In terms of data governance, we have integrated sub-properties and rollups for our 360 clients. But even more important, the integrations in the other Google media buying products like DV, SA, Optimize Google Ads, and BigQuery are all there by now. So these are products we've added since the sunset, and are just a great sign that Google Analytics 4 is keeping on evolving and improving, and we are working on it. In terms of reporting, Philip already mentioned the UTM parameters that are required to use non-Google campaigns in Google Analytics 4. We have added on these to provide even better targeting for that, as well as defaulting or improving the default channel grouping, which has been a questionable point or a point of critics in the beginning of Google Analytics 4. But nevertheless, we are still investing in Google Analytics 4, and Google Analytics 4 is just going to be better and better and better and add more features and more features. These are some areas of investment that Google is investing in 2022 in terms of Google Analytics 4. Please note that these areas are listed here are our future vision, and this is not an official commitment to anything of this is happening. Obviously, it's subject to change, and it's also not exhausted. So it might be that we decide to work on other features, reprioritize, bring things that are not on this list yet, and then actually drop things that we communicate right now. So this is not an official commitment, and this is just features we are trying to invest in 2022. So these include APIs. Obviously, we are going to make the APIs that Google Analytics 4 brings even better in terms of exporting data and matching the UI of Google Analytics in terms of what we can reconstruct in other features. Attribution. Philip already talked about the DDA models in Google Analytics 4, which are the best and most complex we ever had. We are going to work on these even further. Channel groupings is something we have talked about in terms of both custom and default channel groupings. Importing data in Google Analytics from different systems is going to be a thing we continue to work on. Dimensional metrics, especially in terms of custom dimensions. Explorations, another feature Philip already mentioned in terms of reporting, custom reporting. And what would be insights Google Analytics 4 is going to be able to give you in these terms. Integration is something we mentioned. Intelligence in terms of prediction is going to be even further important. And one of the topics I want to cover today as well is the migration tools. So how we can help you as our clients to migrate from Universal Analytics to GA4 with the included tools. And then obviously privacy, huge topic. Google Analytics 4 is built with privacy in its core. So we are constantly going to develop that even further and reporting in terms of what we are reporting and how in the future. For today, let me focus on 5 of these features to give you a little bit more insights on that, starting off with privacy. So GA4 is designed, like I said, with privacy in its core. It's built to meet the expectations of both the businesses we are working with and their end clients and the legislative surroundings we are finding. So in that terms, the controls for privacy are on the most granular level that we can offer so far. One of the examples of that being that GA4 is not longer going to store any IP addresses, which has been hugely asked for point, and we actually serve that in GA4 by now. Next one is going to be dimensional metrics. So we have had a lot of user-based dimensional metrics in GA4 because of the switch of the data model. So our users and our clients requested more session and user-based conversion rates and more in general user and session-based metrics. So they are going to come. Same for we are going to work on additional e-commerce dimensions and in general more custom dimensions to increase the flexibility on how our users can measure and use their data, especially including the item scope dimensions as well as the session and user-based dimensions, just requesting or fulfilling the requests by our users in that direction. In terms of reporting, GA4 already is pretty good in customizable interactable reports and the exploration features that Philip already mentioned earlier, with explorations also including the modeling capabilities of GA4. So we are having reports, both customizable and standard, that show you the unmodeled data. We have explorations that give you insights and not only unmodeled data, but also the modeled data to gain even further insights and how your clients and users behave to properly and better advertise to them and target them and what they're and what you want to achieve in terms of your business goals. And in that regard, you can expect there to be even more modeling and reporting functionalities. We are going to constantly add on the out-of-the-box reporting features and obviously make these available in our reporting to make it easier for you as our clients to gather the insights and achieve your business objectives with these features. Then channel groupings. We know that custom channel groupings have been a hugely loved feature in Universal Analytics, which we didn't have in GA4 in the beginning. We think in general that the default channel grouping in GA4 is already covering the needs of our clients better than it did in Universal Analytics. But we are going to change that and make it even better, and also first of all, improve the default channel groupings even further, and then obviously also increase your flexibility in improving and adding the custom channel groupings as well in the future. And last but not least, the migration tools. So with the GA4 data model being different than the Universal Analytics, we're switching from sessions to events/users. Migration might sound complicated and can be complicated in some points. So what we are doing or what we did already to support this is that we integrated a bunch of migration tools into analytics itself, both in your Universal Analytics properties and then after creation in your GA4 properties. And what we're doing with that is that we are going to service them further, and we are going to constantly keep them up to date with the changing capabilities that GA4 brings. So to design your migration story as smooth as possible, just with the GA4 tools, and then obviously with the support our partners bring in that concern. This was very brief on what we're doing in GA4. I think the center point of that, what we talked about today, is that GA4 is an evolving product and we're working on it. And if you want to find any further information on the detailed more detailed information on the features that are going live and have been going live, there are three main resources for you to check out. So first of all, the Google Analytics Help Center always keeps you up to date in terms of recently new added features and how to make them work for you. Then we have Google Materials and Google programs like the Google Marketing Platform Academy, which we can highly recommend, the Google Skills Shops, and also the Google Enterprise Marketing Portal, where you can find heavily dedicated material and great hands-on classes by our go-to-market teams, which show you how to use and migrate GA4 successfully. And last but not least, definitely one of our most valuable resources, please refer to our partners on the transition and the optimization. They bring the experience and the knowledge of the tools to help you. And they are one of our greatest assets in making this transition work. So thanks again, Philip, for having me here today in terms of a small outlook.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very interesting. I'm very looking forward to what's coming in the next weeks and months. And to be honest, in my opinion, Google Analytics 4 has already outpaced Universal Analytics by far. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Thank you very much, Tim, and have a nice evening.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.